Hey there, Rob. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Um, Kind of took some of the intro I was going to give myself, but all cool. I think I kind of provided that for you anyway, so I should have seen that coming. All right. So, as Rob mentioned, my name is Daniel Kelly, and I am a teacher at Vue School. Um, Essentially, for me, what that means is I get to play with Vue all day long and get to share all that information with you guys. So, it's really an awesome job. Also, I am a father of three children, so if one of them happens to open the store behind me at any point during the talk, just take that as proof that this is a live talk because it's certainly liable to happen. All right, so now let's get on to what you actually came here to learn about, and that is how to migrate from Vue CLI to Vite. Well, actually, let's pump the brakes on that for just one moment and first answer the question, what is Vite? Because there might be a few of you out there who haven't been introduced to it yet, but I guarantee you're going to want to get acquainted real fast. Why? Because Vite is the next generation of front-end tooling that aims to provide a leaner and faster development experience for your day-to-day. Now, I will say that not only does it aim to do so, it actually nails it. All right. Vite makes your development experience super, super fast. But what does that practically mean for your everyday workflow? Well, let me share with you guys a quick common scenario that probably a lot of you are familiar with. That is, you wake up, you get ready to go to work, you drive in or walk 5 feet to the home office, whatever the case may be, and you're ready to knock out some issues, right? You're ready to create some awesome new features, but first, you've got to spin up that local development server. So you type in npm run serve, and then you wait, and then you wait a little bit more, and maybe 10 seconds later, even things still haven't gotten up and running. And so now you're off looking at Twitter, checking out some dad jokes, whatever your thing is, right? Now, this might not be the case for some smaller Vue.js applications. However, some of your larger Vue.js applications that run with Vue CLI certainly can take seconds, even up to minutes, to get that development server up and running. And the biggest problem is that this time that it takes to start up actually grows with the scale of your project, right? The larger the project is, the more time it's going to take. It's just the nature of the beast. Okay, well, we've got our development server up and running. So, okay, we're cool. We can get to work now. And now we're coding away again. And we want to see that first change that we've made. Well, with hot module replacement, that's absolutely possible. But sometimes it can take up to a couple seconds, once again, depending on the size of your project. It's not necessarily a couple seconds for everybody, and smaller projects are really pretty fast. But for your large scale projects, once again, this can be a problem. Now, the actual amount of time that it takes probably isn't that big of a deal. Yes, it adds up over time, but the bigger hit is to your focus. All right. Those small delays in the feedback really take a hit on your focus and receiving that valuable feedback. All right. So those two issues, getting a fast development server startup and getting fast hot module replacement, are exactly the two issues that Vite was created to fix. With Vite, we're talking about dev server start times in the milliseconds, as opposed to the seconds or even minutes. And HMR that is essentially instant. It's really awesome, and you just got to see it to believe it. Okay, trust me, it is a really awesome developer experience. But how does Vite actually pull this off? Well, I don't want to dive too deeply into that today because that's not really what my talk is about. But let's do briefly mention a couple things. First, Vite utilizes the fact that browsers now support ES modules. That means it can essentially ship your JavaScript modules to the browser without any middleman. There's no bundling necessary. It can just directly ship, believe it or not, files from the server to the browser. Pretty cool concept, right? So that's one way that Vite makes things fast. For those kind of files that still need some kind of processing, things like TypeScript or Vue single file components, Vite uses a Go-based bundler called ES-Build, which is 100 times faster than its closest JavaScript-powered counterpart. So that's another way that Vite makes things fast. Once again, I don't want to dive too deeply into these. However, if you get the chance, I encourage you to go check out Alex's talk on how Vite changes the game for excuse me, how Vite changes the game for Vue and web developers. It's a really excellent talk he gave at Vue.js London a few months ago, and it dives into these things a little bit more. And also, we've got a course over at Vue School dedicated to Vite. It goes into some of these internals as well as shows you the features of Vite and how to use them. In the course, you get to use all of the features. You also get to build a Vite template and a Vite plugin. So if Vite is something you're really into, I would really highly suggest you check this course out. All right, so we want to use Vite for our projects. That's clear. But now, how do we get those old Vue CLI powered projects over to Vite? Before I get into the actual 9 steps, let me really quickly just share with you the process of how I came about these 9 steps. And let me go ahead and tell you right now, it was a really difficult process and something that you'll be thankful that I did and you didn't have to do. All right, so here's step number 1. First, I created a brand new Vue CLI powered project. That is, I typed in Vue, create, and a project name, right? And then I chose a few options that I thought were fairly common to a lot of Vue.js projects. I chose Sass as a CSS preprocessor. I chose ESLint for linting. I added Vue router, so on and so forth. Okay, and then I created a brand new project with Vite. And this is accomplished by typing in npm init vite at latest. All right, and then here's the kicker. Here's where the magic happened. I compared the differences between the two. Okay, so you caught me. It wasn't really that difficult of a process, but I did want to share with you how I came about these steps, just so that you know the scope of what I'm going to share. I completely understand that a brand new Vue CLI powered project is not the same thing as a Vue CLI powered project that's been existing for months or even years, right? There's just different dependencies involved, different levels of complexity involved in that more aged project. So I don't expect that these 9 steps will cover 100% of your migration from Vue CLI to Vite. However, I do think these steps will cover probably about 70 to 90% of all the things that you're going to have to do. And certainly it's better to start from 70 to 90% than square one. All right. One more thing I wanted to say before getting to the steps is don't look at these steps as something you have to memorize right now during the talk, right? There are other resources that I've put out there, namely a blog post on Vue School's blog that goes through these steps as well that you can use as a reference as you're going through and migrating your own projects. More of what I want you to get out of this talk is that the steps are available and that it's a process that can be done. Don't be intimidated by migrating from Vue CLI to Vite because, yes, while it's going to take a little bit of work up front, I guarantee you, you're going to appreciate the payoff at the end. All right, so without further ado, let's get now to step number 1. Step number 1 is to update your dependencies. Let's take those Vue CLI related dependencies, such as the Babel plugin, the ESLint plugin, the router plugin, the Vuex plugin if you have it, and the Vue CLI service itself. And let's just get rid of them. Oh man, okay. That feels nice, doesn't it? I don't know what it is about deleting things as a developer, but sometimes that feels even better than writing new things, doesn't it? All right, so we've got rid of those dependencies. The next thing we can get rid of is the Sass loader for Webpack because, well, we're not using Webpack anymore, and Vite supports all common CSS preprocessors out of the box. So no loader required. Get rid of that. We will still need Sass itself, as Vite will require the actual preprocessor. The next thing that we can get rid of is the Vue template compiler. And that's because compiling single file components will be taken care of by the Vite Vue plugin that we're going to install in just a minute. Awesome. Now comes the real cool fun part. Now we get to install Vite, the new shiny magic power, right? And that's accomplished, of course, with npm i-d Vite. And this gets it installed as a new development dependency, or as I might like to say, it gets installed as your new developer experience. All right, the next thing you'll have to do is install a Vue plugin for Vite in order to teach Vite how to deal with single file components. Because as you might know, Vite is a framework agnostic tool. That means it'll work with React, it'll work with Svelte, it'll work with even no framework at all. So we've got to tell it a little bit more about how to work with Vue. Now, if you have a Vue 2 if you have a Vue 2 project, then you're going to want to install this community maintained package, v-plugin-vue 2. However, if you have a Vue 3 project, you're going to want to install the officially maintained Vue plugin for Vite that is at vite.js/plugin-vue. Awesome. And the last part of this step is to run npm prune because we did manually update the package.json. Sweet. Step number 2 now is to provide support for only modern browsers. This is going to keep our builds as lean and as fast as possible. And practically speaking, this means we can remove Babel completely from our project, which is a viable option because as of now, most mobile and desktop evergreen browsers have near full support for ES6 features. And that's the graph, the chart that you see in front of you now. If you still need support for legacy browsers like IE11, one, I feel bad for you, but two, it's completely doable. There is a plugin for Vite that is officially maintained called at Vite.js/plugin-legacy, and this will help get that support for you. But we don't do this we don't take that route in this process. All right, so that means we can delete babel.config.js. And we can also delete a couple of Babel-related dependencies, such as core.js and Babel ESLint. Babel isn't directly a dependency of our project, as it was a dependency of the Babel plugin for Vue CLI, so we don't have to remove that. But these two we can get rid of. Awesome. Now, with Babel ESLint gone, we have to remove it as a parser option from our config file for ESLint. And while we're in here, let's also update the environment here from Node to ES 2021. Now, this is kind of an important step because now that we're working with Vite, when we're in our source code, we're working in ES module land. We're no longer working in Node land, right? And so updating this setting for ESLint is really going to help ESLint keep us in check. Now, this is super important because I know I'm not the only one who gets confused by CommonJS, ES modules, and all the different environments and things you can run in, right? So let ESLint help you out with this. All right, and then enable to support that ES 2021 environment. And you need to install the latest versions of ESLint, which is version 8, and ESLint plugin Vue version 8. And once again, run npm prune because we updated that package.json. Awesome. Step number 3 now is to add the Vite config file. Now, the few lines that you see in front of you are what comes out of the box when you run a new Vite-powered project for Vue. And it's only 9 lines long. Compare that to some kind of Webpack configuration. Pretty sweet, right? You can see there on line 4 where we import the Vue plugin we installed just a couple steps ago. And once again, if you're using Vue 2, it'll look a little bit different, something like this. And then on line 8 is where we register the plugin with Vite. And one last thing we'll need to do in this config file before we go to the next step. Because Vite is a framework agnostic tool, some of those conventions you're used to in Vue CLI aren't present. So what the code before you will do is reinstate the @import alias that you're used to using with Vue CLI. It's just set with a resolve.alias option in Vite, and you see on the left-hand side, we name the alias, and on the right-hand side, we give the absolute path to the directory we want aliased. All right, step number 4 is to move the index.html file into the root of the project. And while you've got the HTML file open, you will want to remove these placeholders for Webpack. And I just chose to replace them with hard-coded values as I didn't see any real value in trying to recreate that functionality. And also this base URL here, you'll want to replace that with an absolute path to your favicon. And lastly, and probably most importantly, the built files will no longer be auto-injected, and thus you'll need to manually provide the entry point for your application. Awesome. Step number 5 is to update the scripts in your package.json file. These are the scripts that were with the Vue CLI project, and of course they're all powered by Vue CLI under the hood. But now they'll change to scripts that are powered by Vite. And you'll notice here that Vite actually uses a different convention for running your dev server. It uses the npm run dev command instead of npm run serve. So of course you could change that here if you wanted to, but probably my recommended approach would be to stick with the new convention, because the serve here actually is something else in Vite. It gives you a way to spin up a preview of your built project, which is pretty cool. And then also, since we had linting involved, we'll also add in that command as well. And instead of using Vue CLI, we'll just use ESLint directly. Step number 6 is to update your environment variables. Now, and thankfully, Vite supports all the exact same .env files that Vue CLI did. Things like .env, .env.local, .env.local, or .mode, and all these things. That doesn't have to change a bit. However, how you access those environment variables will change slightly. So process.env becomes import.meta.env, because remember, we're no longer living in Nodeland. All right, and one more thing you'll have to change. Remember in Vue CLI that they had this nice little feature where you had to prepend Vue_app_ to those environment variables that would be exposed to the client. It's just a security thing and made sure you understood what you were doing. Well, Vite actually takes the exact same approach. However, the prefix just changes, so you'll need to update those to Vite_. Awesome. Step number 7 is to add the .vue extension to all your single file component imports. That is, manually add .vue on the end here. Now, if for some reason that's too big of a process for your project, you can actually make Vite support not providing that .vue extension, and that's done via the resolve.extensions option in your Vite config file. But do be aware that you must also, at that point, configure all the other default options for this, because this is a configuration setting that overrides the default as opposed to being merged with it. Plus, it's not recommended by the Vite docs to do this. Instead, they really recommend that you manually provide that .vue extension in order to best help out your IDE in making it smarter and more intelligent about your code. All right, step number 8, and we're almost there. Step number 8 is to clean up your magic comments. Comments like Webpack chunk name, because they just don't mean anything to Vite at all. Instead, Vite will automatically name your chunks based on the name of the original file, which is super nice. You don't even have to think about it. All right, that leads us to step number 9, which is enjoy that improved developer experience. Now, I guarantee you that once you get to step number 9, yeah, you might not necessarily be all the way there for your project, but you will be awfully, awfully close and one step closer to getting that improved developer experience. And let me tell you guys, it is totally, totally worth it. All right. That's all the steps I have for you guys today. Once again, my name is Daniel Kelly, and I will share out those resources, both for these slides, the blog post, and the course in the chat after all of this. So you guys can have a path to get started migrating your Vue CLI projects to Vite. And once again, I am with Vue School. Thank you guys. Thank Vue School so very much for putting on this awesome conference. And I guess let's see if you guys got any questions.